these developments, but right now I want to speak with Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He now serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
You bet, Wolf. Thanks for having me.
Well, let me get your reaction to this latest news. A source familiar with transition discussions saying Mitt Romney is, quote, seriously considering the possibility of serving as Secretary of State. Your reaction?
Oh, I'd be ecstatic when I heard his name thrown out there. I said, you know, I can't think of really anybody better qualified. There's a lot of good, well-qualified. I've heard a lot of names thrown around, but Mitt would be great. It would send a strong message to the party. It would send a really strong message to the country that Donald Trump is interested in uniting. And then just mechanically, look, Mitt Romney is tough as nails, but he knows how to negotiate, and he's the kind of statesman that we would need out dealing with these really difficult issues around the world. So, you know, look, I hope Mitt Romney, if it's his choice, I hope he takes it. If Donald Trump is still deciding, I hope Donald Trump picks Mitt. I think it would be fantastic for this country.
So you would be reassured about the president-elect if he picked someone like Mitt Romney to be a Secretary of State?
I would, and you know, as we've talked about many times in the past, you know, one of my big concerns was always on the issue of foreign policy and the role of Russia and some of those other issues. Mitt Romney understands, I think, in a very clear way how the world works, understands what American strength is, understands you don't have to use military power all the time, but sometimes economic force, sometimes using energy as a soft weapon, and using incentives as the right way to bring freedom to the world and, frankly, be an example of self-governance to billions that don't have it. It's a very reassuring pick if that's the case. And like I said, since, frankly, the day he gave his victory speech, Donald Trump, I've been very reassured by his tone, and I'm excited to get to work in January when he's sworn in.
And you speak as someone who was highly critical of him during the campaign. Very quickly, General Mattis becoming Defense Secretary, would that please you?
I'd love that. General Mattis, look, you know, the great thing about General Mattis is he says it like it is. He says what he means what he says. He's also, again, is not one of these people that's just going to use military force just because. He understands how this all works and the depth of what American foreign policy is. And his troops loved him. I mean, this is something it's like a General MacArthur kind of thing. His troops that worked for him, I've talked to a lot of them, they said that this guy would have walked into hell for them, and that the leader we need in the Secretary of Defense position. So I'd love it if it's Mattis, and hopefully it gets there.
If that happens with the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, looks like you'll be totally on board with Donald Trump, the President-elect of the United States. How concerned are you, Congressman, though, about Donald Trump apparently still involved in running his businesses, that his children are running the company while still playing a major role in his transition? Today, Trump told the New York Times, and I'm quoting him now, "The law is totally on my side. The president can't have a conflict of interest." How problematic is that point of view, if you think it is?
I think it can be problematic. I think, you know, look, when you're president of the United States, you have to have one focus, and that is being president of the United States. You don't have an opportunity to think about anything else but what you have to do that morning, what you have to do in the long term, and how to lead this country through very difficult times. And hopefully through this transition, President-elect Trump realizes that, you know, this is a beyond full-time job. It's probably basically 2 or 3 full-time jobs. And look, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt in the transition. This is, you know, we're 2 weeks into this, basically. This is a man that has no political experience, that's coming to grips with the reality of the presidency. And I have no problem with his children running the business. I mean, the name is Trump, and I think it's very American to pass your business on to your children. But I think in terms of building a firewall, that's going to be very essential, and so we'll see over the next couple of months what happens there. But for now, I think it's early, and I think Donald Trump is going to come to realize that he's not going to have much time for anything but running America.
Do you feel confident in retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's ability to be the top national security advisor in the White House based on statements he's made earlier this year about Islam, about Muslims?
I have concerns with General Flynn a little bit. Some of them are, you know, appearing next to Vladimir Putin Russian television, things along that line. I do, as a national security advisor, that is completely obviously up to the president-elect to determine who he wants by his side. In terms of the Islam statement, look, I have said many times that I think radical Islam is a cancer. And if the general meant like it's a cancer among 1.7 billion people, well, look, it is. I mean, you have tens of thousands of people that would walk into a nursery school and blow themselves up. I don't necessarily think he was saying it's a cancer in everybody within that 1.7 billion people. But look, we have to defeat this. And so in terms of General Flynn, I'm going to come into this with an open mind and understand that the president has the ability to put people he trusts around him.
When you look at some of these people who might be involved in the administration, let's say from General Flynn, maybe Mitt Romney, how do you think Trump reaches a coherent foreign policy with advisors who are on different worldviews, presumably?
Well, I think this is where it's smart of a president to do. You put people with different views around you, and then you take that information and make the best decisions. Some of the trouble that past presidents, and I would argue to an extent even President Obama, has gotten himself into is surrounding yourself with people that have your exact same worldview. And in that, everybody's worldview, even mine to some extent, has errors. You just don't necessarily know where those errors are. And in putting people around you that have different views, maybe allow you to see the errors that you have in some cases, or the strengths that you believe in, or to adopt from different views. So I think surrounding yourself with people that have counter narratives is actually really good. And it leaves it to President-elect Trump to be the decision maker, because he knows at the end of the day the decisions rest on him.
The president-elect met yesterday over at Trump Tower with Democratic Congressman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, a veteran like yourself. Do you think it would be smart for Trump to include Tulsi Gabbard and maybe other Democrats in key national security positions?
This was a call for me because I'm friends with Tulsi. I know her well, but I vehemently disagree with her worldview. In fact, the statements I heard her make about the Assad regime were actually some of the same statements she made when I was debating her on this very network a couple weeks before we began bombing ISIS, where she was arguing against bombing ISIS. So, look, I think she's a great person. I get along with her well, but I totally disagree with her worldview. And I think in a position like I've heard her floated for the UN or something like that, she would be the wrong choice. And frankly, I think she'd have a really hard time getting confirmation through the Senate.
I need you to stand by, Congressman. There's more to discuss. Also, after reversing course on some key issues, where does Donald Trump stand as he puts together a new administration? I'll also speak with a key Trump insider, Sean Spicer. Breaking news after some pretty sharp condemnations of the news media. Donald Trump actually sits down today with the New York Times. He condemns neo-Nazis, white supremacists, says his business interests do not represent a conflict of interest, indicates he does not favor investigating or prosecuting Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton for that matter. Joining us now, a member of Donald Trump's inner circle, Adam Kinzinger, who's still with us. He's not a member of Donald Trump's inner circle, but maybe you will be after you're enjoying some of these potential announcements he's making. The member of Donald Trump's inner circle who will be joining us shortly is Sean Spicer, strategist, communications director for the Republican National Committee. You're a combat veteran. You served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Let's talk a little bit about what Donald Trump has told the New York Times today. He actually seems to have changed his mind, Congressman, when it comes to the usefulness of waterboarding, enhanced interrogation, torture, as some call it, after his conversation with retired Marine General James Mattis. He said this. He said, referring to General Mattis, "I've never found it to be useful." He added that Mr. Mattis found more value in building trust and rewarding cooperation with terror suspects. Quote, "Give me a pack of cigarettes and a couple of beers and I'll do better." Trump said, "I was impressed by that answer." And Trump said torture is not going to make the kind of difference that he originally might have thought. So he seems to be reversing his position on waterboarding, enhanced interrogation. What's your reaction to that?
I think it's good. I mean, look, I think, surrounding yourself with people that have been there and understand. Look, I've been through, various SEER, survive, evade, resist, and escape kinds of training. And I will tell you the ones that were most effective on me, where you're more likely to break, are those ones where somebody builds a rapport and you find yourself trusting somebody. And in fact, the greatest spy for the Germans, or the greatest interrogator for the Germans in World War II, actually became best friends with a bunch of American aviators that were captured and actually got the most intelligence of basically any interrogator in the world. And so that is most effective. Now, I've always said that you can't ban outright the use of enhanced interrogations technique because you never know what you never know. There always could be a moment when you have an imminent terrorist attack happening or something along that line in which a president may have to make that awful decision. But I think in general, to default to that or to say it's something that we're going to use regularly, the answer. And all I have to do is listen to a Senator John McCain who basically says the same thing, and he's been through it. He understands. And
you'll be happy to know in that same New York Times interview, he spent an hour answering reporters' questions from the New York Times. He said General Mattis, in his words, is being, quote, seriously considered to become the next Secretary of Defense. Quote, I think it's time maybe for a general. All right, Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, thanks very much for joining us.
You bet, Wolf. Thanks a lot.